slept pretty good, although had to wake up a couple times. It's one of those sleeps where I dream and then wake up and then get to go back to the dream. I don't quite remember what the dream was, um, but it was cool. Another thing I want to put out there, if you haven't kind of started this kind of technique already, is napping around 2 o'clock. Um, I've been napping around 2 o'clock for about, I don't know, several years, and 20 minutes, 20 minutes, between 20 and 26 minutes. And what's happened is that my experience of my mind, the racing mind experience, the experience where the mind is just kind of like churning out thoughts and analysis and my experience with that is when I is it's just so dialed down. It's just so dialed down. And what's interesting about the mind not doing kind of its normal thing is the relationship that I can have with my mind now that it's not so just spun up. It's kind of like with your kids, if you have kids, in the earliest parts of their lives, as they start to learn how to talk, et cetera, there's no real filter. It's just kind of coming out, whatever. But as they get older and as they make, as you get to make uh, a deeper relationship with them and they understand how to relate a little bit better, it's just a smoother experience. There's more interaction as opposed to just kind of like normal outbursts, stuff like that. So anyway, drink water, naps. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of thinking this as a learning process and a participation. You participate with what's going on inside of your head and inside of your body, as opposed to distract yourself from your head or distract yourself from your body. And that's kind of what we'll get to today. We'll talk a little bit about bell 2. We'll reemphasize bell 1 and we'll get into bell 2 and 3. So we've got the 4 bells here. Make sure you can see this. Kids have just destroyed all my stuff. 4 bells. Okay. That doesn't look very clear either. Bell 1 is present focus senses. Okay. So why is bell 1 present focus senses? Well, we live in this society. Now, just think about this. We live in a culture that has its kind of catchphrase as the American dream. So the idea behind the American dream is that there is progress. And the progress is you start in America and then you get to your dream. But the basic assumption is that once you get to your dream, everything's squared away. And so what bell 1 addresses is this notion of the mindset of past and future. Okay, so fundamentally, we are kind of enculturated around a mindset of the past is a certain way, and if you do everything right, you get to the future. And this future place is this special place that is everything you've ever wanted. It's happiness. Okay, so I'm going to tell you how that kind of worked for me. So let's make sure you can see this. All right, so 1980. Okay. I'm born. We get to 1990. This span of time here, this 10 years right here, was just spectacular, right? It's just wonderful. Everything was very predictable. As a family, we had predictable vacations. As in our community, we kind of evolved. I mean, we really lived the American dream, and it was really quite spectacular. And so, being born in 1980, going to 1990, it was just a wonderful experience. Well, in 1990, without going into details, I'll just call this trauma. Okay. And I it's not that I don't talk about this stuff. I absolutely do. It's just that I don't have that much time to go into all the details. So there's trauma. Okay. Now, we are in a culture of mind, past, future. So that's what I mean by past future is that the mind is encouraged to always be either in the past and analyzing the past and preparing for the future. Now, in the veterans world, this is called vigilance. Okay. So you're always assessing threat, always preparing for threat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So 1990 happens, trauma happens. Now, here's the deal with trauma. Okay. Trauma gets into the body. Okay, trauma gets into the body. If you want to know more details about that, Dr. Bressel van der Kolk. Body keeps score. Okay, body keeps score. All right. So this happens. All right. Now, I'm 10 years old. This happens to me. But remember, I'm in the American dream. So do you think that I, in any way, shape, or form, recognize that my body would hold on to this stuff? Or do you think anybody told me about how to pay attention to my body or anything like that? The answer is no. And it's not surprising. It's not anything I'm angry about. It's just that's the way it was. And that's still kind of the way it is. The body, and I talked about this a couple days ago when I was giving my larger narrative story stuff. But the body is often seen as kind of the weakness, right? So if in the military, what's pain? It's weakness, leaving the body, Ideally, that once you get over the body, right? Once you get over it, you get to this ideal place, right? You're a warrior. Also, again, the mind, right? This notion of there's a place to go, there's a place to get to, there's this idealized future. Sorry, this isn't going so smoothly. There's this idealized future, and if you just get to it, then everything will be fine. But anyway, so this all takes place in 1990. I proceed throughout my life to about, let's go 2001. Which is, this is 9/11. Say 9/11. And I have developed, in response to trauma, maladaptive techniques. So how do I handle all this from a perspective of this? By creating mountain bed techniques. And boy, I got up to 300 pounds at one point. So right here, this part of my life, been 300 pounds. Damn near got kicked out of school. My response to the trauma was that it's in your body, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it's in your body. But my response to that was to kind of ignore it, or to push through it, or to visualize it getting to a place where I wouldn't be bothered by it, becoming a warrior. I had all these dreams, right? I had these ideas. And one of my biggest ideas was if I proved myself in war during the military, that it would go away. So I've developed from 1990 to 2001. So that's 11 years, and you could say it's my whole life because I wasn't aware of really anything here. You could say that my whole life had the kind of the development of these maladaptive kind of techniques or processes for managing this trauma. And so by the time I get to 2001 and join the military, all of this has become integrated into my being as a kind of an identity, a way of thinking and a way of being. Now, what's significant about this, and then I'm going to kind of redo this, is that the body keeps score, and then the brain wires. So the brain, that's a terrible brain. The brain wires stuff in. That's not even worth putting up there. The brain wires stuff in. So I've normalized all these things, right? They've just become a normal part of who I am, and I'm just dealing with that. So keeping this mindset going. All right, bear with me. We're almost to the point. We're almost to bell 2 and 3. Okay, so that gets you to me joining the military. This is the mindset we're working with. Okay, so let's go 2001. 2010. Okay, 2001, 2010. We've got another trauma, which is in 2006. Another big event, and that's the IED. That's getting blown up. So in 2006, I get blown up. So between 2006, that's 2007, and 2010 is when everything falls apart. It's about, so 2007 to 2008/9 is just red. Two 2010 to 2009 is rough. There's a lot going on in that time span, largely because I'm still here. I'm still thinking that there's a place to get to where it all goes away. All I got to do now is just get married, or all I got to do now is just graduate, or all I got to do is this, or all I got to do is that. But the problem is I've now got two traumas, a couple decades or so apart, 16 years apart. I've got two traumas. I've got military training, and military training is really a moving away from the body, not interacting with the body. So I've got two traumas. I've got military training, and I've got a mindset that's in the past and the future. Okay, so once, and this is in 2010, I find mindfulness. So that's about right now. I find mindfulness. Okay, that's presence. This is bell 1. Presence is bell 1. So I start to recognize that mindfulness is a different mindset than up here. It's a different mindset than kind of this whole American dream model, this whole idea behind, there's this place to get to, all that other kind of stuff. So once mindfulness hits, that's like, oh, and so I start cultivating mindfulness with bell 1. Now I didn't use bell 1. I was just cultivating the practice of presence and awareness. But what I started to experience as I'm developing present tense awareness is the body. The first thing that happened when I came back from Iraq and started interacting with my life after Iraq is my body was in pain all the time. And by 2010, actually more like 2008, 8, 9, 10, I was so desperate for anything that would help me sleep again. That's why I always talk about sleep in the beginning. Sleep was a major issue. How I sleep again, I first found yoga. Now, yoga is getting into the body in a way that's very different than military no pain, no gain. So this is also no pain, no gain. So the yoga, once I started getting into the body and started moving my body in a comfortable way, everything got a little bit different. It was like, oh, there's other ways to move my body. Oh, there's other ways to think about my muscles and my shoulders and there's other ways to, what about moving really slow? That's interesting. So once I started to recognize the body, that was very, very interesting, because what would happen is if I could get into the present moment with my senses, bell 1, senses, then I could get to the body. I could just kind of get to the body by shifting my focus from my senses to my body. So bell 1 is senses, bell 2 is body. Now, what's interesting about this, and this is where the central nervous system comes in, is this mindset, while it can give you motivation for the future, can also spin your head up and put you into what's called fight or flight. Fight or flight. So because the mind can take place in the past and the future, you could actually be in a calm, quiet environment, but because you're focused on the past, future of your head and you're not aware of it, you can spin up your traumas so that even in a place where you're safe, you can experience this fight or flight. And fight or flight changes your whole nervous system. So it activates everything. Okay? And so if you're not aware of this, you can spin yourself up just by thinking. And so what happens when you can go from senses to body 2 is you can turn fight or flight into relaxation response. You can turn it into a relaxation response, which is the opposite of fight or flight. It smooths this all out. So bell 2, get to the body, relaxation response. And that can take as little as 90 seconds. And this relaxation response is Dr. Herbert Benson. Okay, so that's bell 2. Now, what happens when you get into the relaxation response and you start to kind of be with your body, which is noticing your ground, your pelvis, your core, your heart space, your throat, the top of your head. Okay, so once you've established a relationship to that, which is all about bell 2, bell 2 is the relationship to the body, you can get to bell 3. which is breath. There is no more important, significant tool in your toolbox for managing your internal environment than your breathing. There are an infinite ways to breathe. There's so many styles of breathing, you can't even believe it. It's amazing once you start doing it. But once you start to get skillful at bell 1, getting to the present moment, that's breaking away from this enculturation. Bell 2, getting into the body, again, breaking away from this enculturation, especially military. I mean, heck, if you're coming up in the past 20 years, if the past 20 years is all the life you know, all you've known is war. Whether you're civilian or a warrior or not, all you've known is war. We've been in war overseas for forever. I think in the entirety of our nation, we've only not been in war for like 26 years or something. So anyway, we've enculturated all this stuff, and it's part of our national narrative. You know, what the narrative that Armor Down's supporting is a counter narrative, and it's a narrative that's different. It's a different narrative than what the grand American narrative is, and part of what we're seeing now is the falling apart of the grand American narrative. So anyway, you get to bell 3, and you're getting into breath, and breath can take fight, flight, relaxation, response. It can take you up, right? It can take you up the spectrum. It can take you down the spectrum. And what happens when you get good at breath work and you get good at getting into bell 3 is you can start to practice meditation. So once you start practicing meditation, here's your Armor Down meditation cushion. Once you start practicing meditation, you now can fundamentally start changing the actual experience of anxiety. So once you start getting into breath work and breath work and meditation, this fight or flight stuff, this relaxation response, any kind of out of balance experience, any kind of anxious experience, you can literally change how you experience it. For me, it's a volume thing. So in the early days, if I got real anxious, it would get to volume 10. And 10 were meltdowns, crying and sobbing in the corner. Total lack of confidence. Like I'm a loser, just everything, fraud, the whole 9. So that's 10. Okay. With meditation, you can get the volume. So this is really I experience this as volume, like an actual, like the volume of a stereo, like the actual volume. The actual volume, like it's either turned up or the volume's down. So keep in mind, I've not gotten rid of anxiety, and you can't get rid of anxiety. It's part of you. It's important. You need it. You need it to kind of get you motivated and to do stuff, but it doesn't have to be so loud. So what happens when you start to get to bell 3, and if you can do it on a regular basis, the volume goes down. So in the typical stuff, right, the typical stuff that causes a 10, right, now only causes a 7. And then over time, it's only a 6. And then over time, it's only a 5. And once the volume starts to go down, you get to the place where you start to realize that all these things that are challenging you aren't signifiers of failure, aren't kind of your life's broken, et cetera, et cetera. They're just opportunities. They're opportunities to evolve. And in the context of the art of peace, they're essential to your evolution. Now, the key thing that I want to bring to you, and the key thing that Armor Down does, and the key thing that, soft power is helping you recognize that getting to these places, getting to these processes is a series of skills that you have to practice. And what we do at bell 1, 2, 3, and ultimately bell 4 is give you the steps to practice too slowly start getting to these better awareness, this better kind of interaction with what's going on. So, I've already talked for half an hour. So let's get over to the mat or the cushion, and let's go through bell 1, 2, and 3. See my little studio here? Pretty cliche, right? Okay, so the first thing you want to be aware of when you're getting yourself set is, what are your cues? What cues do you follow for comfort? What makes you comfortable? And everyone has their own cues. For me, it's my legs. If I got to get my legs comfortable. Some people, it's their back. Some people, it's where they're sitting. It's an external thing. Some people, it's an internal thing. But you want to take those into consideration and just do them. Take the time to make yourself more comfortable. It always pays off. And you start to build that habit. And what that habit is that your body is sending you language, or not language, your body is sending you communication. And if you're not listening to your body, if you're not communicating with your body will find more and more powerful ways to communicate with you. But if you listen to your body and communicate with your body, and the first way to do it is around comfort, you can start to realize that there's consistencies there, or there's what's the word I'm looking for? There are patterns that you can recognize, be like, oh, okay, so if I do this, then the body like this, and da, da, da. So you find these patterns, and you're just like, oh, so this is what my body needs. This is what works for me. And so, I can't tell you how to cue your for comfort. And ultimately, what you want to see me as is just a kind of a window into these skills that you've already got. And so I'm pretty much like, I'm not unnecessary. You don't need me to do this well. Now, for the time being, and as you kind of get this into you, I'm very useful, but ultimately I'm not useful. You can practice mindfulness all day long, and you ideally should, because the notion that you're literally only at 33% capacity if you're just allowing your mind's narrative to drive your life. So finding ways to practice and to get this kind of organized as part of your engagement with your whole self is really, really important, and it really makes a big difference. So once you've gotten yourself comfortable, we'll go into bell 1. This is the bell. Okay, so it makes it sound like this. Go ahead and just close your eyes right away. Come into your sense of sound. Now, organize where the sounds are in your mind. So I've got, if straight ahead of me is 12 o'clock, I've got at 1 o'clock, I've got the refrigerator. Everywhere else is pretty quiet. Sometimes I can hear a small sound of birds, but there's really nothing in here for me to kind of focus on with my sense of sound other than that one. So I've got sound squared away. So next, go into your sense of touch. So sense of temperature. Maybe you're touching some kind of blanket or cushion or fabric. Just notice that. And you might be able to notice temperature difference. You might be able to notice the temperature of, say, your neck or your back of your hands or your forearms. You might be able to notice the temperature there compared to the temperature at something covered. So like your pants or your shirt. So noticing temperature difference. Next, get to smell and taste. We're kind of moving in closer to the body, kind of the insides of the body. Sound, you can hear what's way outside the body. Sight, you can see what's way outside the body. But when we get to touch, now it's closer. And smell and taste is even closer still. Now just kind of sit for a second with your senses inside the present moment. Now, if your mind wanders, what's coming next, analysis, questioning, etc., try to stay connected to what kind of focal point we're on. So if your mind runs away in bell 1, come back to what you hear, come back to what you smell, come back to what you taste. And when we go into bell 2, it's going to be coming back to the body, back to the body, back to the body. So the thing with the mind is that if you give the mind something to do, the mind will be less inclined to run off, chirping away at something else. So give your mind something to do by focusing it on your ground. So what's underneath you? What is directly underneath you? What are the contours of what's underneath you? What is the firmness or cushion of what's underneath you? What parts of your legs are underneath you? Are you sitting crisscross applesauce? Are your feet planted on the ground? Are your feet lifted? Is one foot different than the other foot? Interact with the sensation of your ground. Then move up to the area of the pelvis or the hips. And in the area of the pelvis and the hips, it's always worth just shifting a little bit. Maybe shift left, maybe shift right, and kind of pings the region. And by that, I mean it kind of says, okay, region, what's going on down there? And it's in the military context, it's like getting a sit rep. You kind of, voodoo 1143 or voodoo 1143 sit rep over. And so then you give a response. And what your body is always doing through sensation is giving you a response. So you're pinging the pelvis and the pelvis responds sensationally. Then you move up to the core. Now, in the core, you've got lots and lots of layers. So it's always worth kind of letting those layers soften. Letting those layers of the core soften, seeing what happens when you let the layers of the core soften. The core has a lot of value. How we look at the core has a lot of value in our society and in our culture. So it's often an area where lots of holding takes place, lots of shame takes place, there's lots going on at the core. So let that go. But at the same time, don't let it out. Just let it go and lift your heart. Okay. Now, by that, I mean your heart space. So if your ribs were an umbrella and your upper torso was an umbrella, you'd be lifting the whole umbrella, not the front of the umbrella or the back of the umbrella. You'd be lifting it from the center. So your spine kind of lifts the heart space. And the kind of the slack that you created in the belly gets taken up as you lift the heart space. And once you get to the heart space, I want you to think about shoulder blades. So shoulder blades sit on the back, and I want you to just move your shoulder blades. Just move your shoulder blades. If you can move your shoulder blades, you'll also be able to move your collarbones. Your collarbones and your shoulder blades move at the same time. And just kind of set your shoulders where you think they feel the best. Once again, it's entirely up to you. There's no right place to put your shoulders. Put them where you think it feels the best for you. And now come up to your throat space. Throat space. Now, it's easy to feel throat space. Just swallow. Feel that in your throat. Now, see if you can feel air moving up and down your throat as you breathe. Now, just ask your mind, say, hey, mind, can you feel the temperature difference between the air going in and the air going out? And the mind will be like, oh, I don't know. So then your mind will be quiet probably for as long as it takes you to notice whether you can feel that. Then get to the top of your head. Give your mind something to do again by imagining getting taller in your spine by 1 millimeter, even less than a millimeter. And what you're looking for by the time you get to the top of your head is alert and relaxed. So your body is alert, your senses are active, but you're relaxed. Your muscles aren't, especially the muscles of the face. Soften the muscles around the eyes, soften the muscles around the cheeks, soften the muscles around the chin. Now let's go into third bell. Once we get to third bell, we're into the bell that deals with the breath. So for here, just take a baseline breath. And by that, I mean just let your body breathe how it normally does and just notice it as it is. And then when you're ready, max your breath out. Go to the biggest inhale you can make. And then do that a couple times. And see if you can feel your body move as you do this. Now, think about your sides, breathe to your sides, and feel your sides. Just notice how thinking about the body at a particular location and then breathing to that location as you still think about that location can influence how you feel that location. So this little practice right here just reinforces this relationship between your mind and your body create. They create. And it's often that the mind and the body create, but the person only notices what the mind's doing. The person only notices what the mind is doing. So your mind and your body are always creating your human experience, but you're often only aware of your mind. And so what you want to do is you want to get through bell 1 and 2 to get to bell 3 to start to recognize how to say to your mind, hey, you're running away, let's come back to the breath. Hey, you're thinking about this, let's come back to the breath. And so you literally over and over and over again, just like a toddler at the 2-year-old age where they seem to be trying to kill themselves. You just have to keep getting them back to a safe place, back to a safe place. And so for the mind, it's keep coming back to the breath, keep coming back to the breath, keep coming back to the breath. And over time, what you'll learn is you'll learn these little kind of tools and tricks to kind of keep the mind engaged with what the breath is doing at that moment. So let's finish up. Let's just finish with another round of 2 inhales, 2 exhales. On your second exhale, we're done, and then we'll finish up the training. So quick recap. Bell 1 is all about focusing on the present moment. Bell 2 is getting to the body. The body is an overlooked aspect of our culture. It's not something that is seen as something you interact with. It's largely seen as something that's on display or something that's being used to meet a particular end. It's not typically used as a kind of a way to tame the mind. It's often seen as kind of a limitation, et cetera, et cetera. That's bell 2. That you just don't junk all that stuff. The stuff about the body being this or the body being that or the body having to look a particular way. All that stuff's largely junk. What the body is 13.5 billion years of evolution just handed to you as a resource. It's like, hey, and we'll talk about this bell 4. Hey, you're more than your thoughts. You're more than your body. You're something else. And that something else is getting a full human experience on this wonderful planet. And you've got all these assets at your availability, and we just have not used them. Maybe we did at some point, but then we stopped. We put a lot of emphasis on our intellect, which is cool. We've got a lot of wonderful stuff out of that, but it's not the end all be all. And what we're seeing now is the resurgence of these new levels of awareness, and it's happening. It's totally happening. And so, if you're working with me, that means you're ahead of the curve, and you're going to be at levels of awareness before others are, and you're going to be at levels of awareness that our kids are going to come up with. Our kids are coming up with the language of interacting with the body, with the language of listening to their thoughts and knowing what it means to bring out their best self, stuff like that. So, everybody's doing it, right? So now it's time to get going with it. It's like having a hammer, right? And having to nail something in, and having a hammer and just using your hand or just using a rock. It's like you have a hammer. Use the hammer to hammer the nail. And you don't even realize you have the hammer, so you just keep using a rock, and it's just ineffective. The whole while you got this hammer, but you just don't even know it. So that's bell one, that's bell two, and then bell three is your breath. It changes the way your internal environment is experienced by you. If you feel anxiety at a really, really high level, so much so that you start to feel it in your body, you can practice meditation, and that will influence how you actually feel the anxiety. It doesn't fix the anxiety. It doesn't cause anxiety to go away. It changes the way anxiety is experienced. And once that happens, once you begin to see that and believe that and understand, oh shit, that's true, then anxiety takes on you take on a different relationship to anxiety. In the mind, anxiety is seen as a failure because the mind is always analyzing. If I just do all this stuff, I won't have any anxiety. It's not how it works. Life is forever complex, and there's no way around any of this stuff. You can't think your way through this stuff. You have to learn how to participate with it. And so the stanza, and I'll be done for the day, is 74, which is, be grateful even for hardships, setbacks, and bad people. Dealing with such obstacles is an essential part of the training in the art of peace. And so, all this stuff, if you didn't have it, there would be no need to train. And so the fact that we've got to deal with this stuff and we got these challenges in our lives is a valuable thing. And so there's lots of room for improvement, and there's lots of ways to experience this thing we call human life that you just never realized. So with that, I'll finish up. Thanks for hanging in there and watching through all this. I hope it made sense. If anything doesn't make sense, see, me, I love to talk about this stuff. So feel free to reach out, and any questions at all, no problem. Love it. Love to connect with anybody. So we'll finish up for the day, and thank you for hanging in there, and we'll see you later.